Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving straight into the explosive evolution of PC entertainment. We're going to look at a very specific, wildly dynamic window of time, moving from the absolute software boom of 1997 all the way to the mainstreaming of multimedia hardware just a few years later. It's an incredible journey. We're talking extreme ambition, developers pushing aging technology to its absolute limits, and how all of this eventually changed the way everyday people interacted with computers right in their own living rooms. Here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with the 1997 PC gaming boom, put a spotlight on Shadow Warrior, look at how it practically broke the build engine, cover its controversy and open source legacy, and finally wrap up with the mainstreaming of the multimedia PC. All right, Section 1, the 1997 PC gaming boom. Let's see how a single month, September 1997, set the stage for a massive leap in what PCs could actually do. Listen, if you were a computer enthusiast back then, September 1997 was an absolute goldmine. We saw the simultaneous releases and beta tests of heavyweights that just completely pushed the boundaries of strategy, 3D graphics, and online connectivity. I mean, we're talking about the arrival of genre-defining titles like Age of Empires and Total Annihilation going head-to-head at the exact same time. You had Hexen 2 pushing 3D environments, and Interplay's Starfleet Academy flying off the shelves. The sheer volume of ambitious, boundary-pushing software dropping all at once was, frankly, staggering. And to really wrap our heads around the scale of this era, check this out. During this exact same month, Origin was wrapping up the beta test for Ultima Online, and they reported that 2,850 simultaneous players were occupying the exact same virtual world. That established a world record at the time. Think about that for a second. Putting thousands of people from all over the globe into one shared, continuous digital space, that was a mind-boggling technical achievement for 1997 infrastructure. But here's the catch. All of this booming software urgently demanded more horsepower. The standard processors of the day, they just couldn't keep up with the visual ambitions of these developers. And that kicked off the golden age of 3D accelerator cards. Companies were scrambling to release hardware like the 3DFX Voodoo cards, the Canopus Pure 3D, and the Riva 128. These weren't just minor little upgrades either. They were dedicated, power-hungry boards required to render the increasingly complex textured worlds that consumers were suddenly demanding. Let's move into Section 2, Spotlight on Shadow Warrior. We're going to use this specific game to track their rapid evolution from promise to reality. Shadow Warrior had a completely chaotic life cycle, and it perfectly mirrors the industry's rapid changes. Development actually began way back in early 1994, when it was previewed to rival the original Doom. They were promising things like true VR, where players could look up and down. But as we know, the industry was moving at light speed, so the game had to constantly evolve. It finally saw shareware and retail release via GT Interactive in late 1997, so it essentially had to radically reinvent itself during a 3-year development cycle just to keep pace with the hardware revolution. And the premise? Totally wild, loud, and over the top. It was developed by 3D Realms on Ken Silverman's build engine, which is the same underlying 3D tech framework that powered Duke Nukem 3D. You play as a bodyguard named Wang, and you take on Zilla Enterprises' demonic hordes in a futuristic Japan after discovering the corporation's corrupt, world-conquering plans. It promised a massive leap forward from their previous hits, arming you with ancient weapons like katanas, but also high-tech gear like railguns. Moving to Section 3, Breaking the Build Engine. Here's where we see how they pushed 1997 hardware to the absolute brink. The crucial thing to understand here is how this game practically broke its underlying engine to deliver on those massive 1994 promises. Standard shooters back then, the ones built on older tech, were mostly flat. You got basic walking and running through static corridors with flat 2D sprite items. But Shadow Warrior, they bent the aging build engine to its absolute limits. They introduced true room-over-room situations, meaning a fully realized floor directly above another floor, which was incredibly difficult to pull off on this engine. Even crazier, they threw in fully drivable tanks and speedboats, and swapped out flat 2D sprites for 3D voxels for weapons and inventory items. And they didn't stop there. They squeezed out every ounce of processing power available. They added transparent water, which, fun fact, actually slowed down top-of-the-line Pentium 200 machines at the time. They built complex climbing mechanics with ladders and designed entire rooms that could shift, change angles, and rotate in real time. Oh, and here's a great piece of trivia. It featured the very first sticky bomb in a first-person shooter,
a mechanic that would, blow up in popularity years later with games like Halo. They were pulling all of this off just before hardware 3D acceleration became the mandatory standard.
Let's hit Section 4, Controversy and Open Source. The game's legacy is defined just as much by its cultural debate as its code.
So, when the game finally released, it sparked some significant debate regarding its depiction of Asian cultures. Academics and journalists pushed back heavily. For instance, Elliot Chin, writing in Computer Gaming World, called it out for insensitive and inauthentic representations of East Asian society. Critics, including academics like Assistant Professor Anthony Seifai Shu, argued that it relied heavily on inauthentic stereotypes and portrayed Japanese corporations in a traditionally rapacious light. On the flip side, the developers at 3D Realms defended their work against these critiques. Their stance was that the game was deliberately designed as a melange of Asian culture intended to parody bad kung fu movies. They argued that the game fundamentally didn't take itself too seriously, and they emphatically stated they did not intend to make a racist game. Ultimately, this friction between cultural representation and late 90s gaming humor became a permanent, undeniable part of the game's historical footprint. But the story doesn't end in the 90s. Fast forward a few years, to April 1st, 2005. 3D Realms did something highly unusual for the time. They dropped the game's compiled build engine source code to the public under a GPL license. This basically made the underlying code free for anyone to use and modify. And because they did it on April Fool's Day, a lot of users initially thought it was a joke. But it was very real, and it cemented the game's legacy in the programming world forever. Because of this open source drop, independent programmers went straight to work. Actually, a programmer named Jonathan Fowler spawned the JF Shadow Warrior source port the very next day on April 2nd. This allowed the community to add Linux support, squash bugs, and ensure that this highly specific snapshot of 1997 tech history survived into the modern era. And it paved the direct path for publisher Devolver Digital to eventually release a remastered classic Redux on modern storefronts in 2013. All right, our final section, Section 5. Mainstreaming the multimedia PC. Let's see how the hardware eventually caught up. We have to ask ourselves a vital question here. With software pushing visual and audio limits so aggressively, how did the industry transition from selling complicated, expensive 3D accelerator cards to hardcore gamers in 1997 to getting these rich multimedia experiences into everyday households for the average consumer? Well, by 2003, the answer looked a lot like the Gateway M500. This wasn't some clunky beige tower meant for a home office desk. It was a 7-pound notebook specifically emphasizing audio and video performance. Look at these specs, a 15.2-inch widescreen display built specifically to enhance DVD movie playback, a built-in subwoofer for cinematic sound in a laptop, and dedicated NVIDIA graphics right out of the box, all for $1,599. The hardware had finally caught up, integrating all those advanced multimedia demands born in the late 90s into a sleek all-in-one consumer package. But honestly, the technology itself is only half the story. The distribution is what truly marks the shift here. Gateway bypassed the traditional tech retail stores entirely with the N500. Instead, they experimented by launching and selling the special edition multimedia hub directly to consumers on live television via the Home Shopping Network. By targeting adult and back-to-school shoppers on a fixed-volume channel, meaning they didn't even have to carry huge retail inventories, they officially transitioned the high-powered multimedia PC from a niche hobbyist machine right into an accessible, mainstream household entertainment appliance. So as we look back at this incredible journey, from a pixelated ninja fighting in a digital dojo on an overclocked engine, to thousands of players sharing a virtual world in 1997, all the way to a widescreen laptop sold on live cable television, it leaves us with one pretty provocative thought to ponder today. If those wild, chaotic software ambitions of the past ultimately transformed the clunky desktop computer into the ubiquitous multimedia powerhouse we rely on today, what invisible, boundary-pushing tech evolution are we quietly living through right now that will define our households tomorrow? Thanks so much for joining us for this explainer. We'll see you next time.